positives for Taylor Fritz, DK, because obviously you look for Fritz, who's 28 years old, 4 in the rankings, 5 ELO, 8th overall ELO, finishes 52-21 overall, 5th most wins on the season. However, since the start of the grass court season, Taylor Fritz has been a different player. 35-11 overall during that stretch. During that time, he also won Stuttgart. He won Eastbourne. It cannot be undersold that on back-to-back days, he beat Alcaraz and Zverev to thrust Team World to that United Cup title because he was the best player in the building that weekend, which only matters in the sense that no one else even had, amongst these top guys, no one else even had a bite at the apple against a Carlos Alcaraz or a Jannik Sinner type. It felt like all season long. So yes, I'm including those amongst his best wins. Again, he also beat Zverev in the Stuttgart final, flips that head-to-head. He's second by hold percentage, 42nd by break percentage, 11-4 at the slams, is tied for the 7th most, 45-13 against opponents ranked outside the top 20, second most wins, 7-8 against the top 20, tied for 10th most wins, 3-4, not great, against top 10 competition, tied for the 13th most wins. It's his third Tour Finals appearance, DK, second consecutive. Fascinated what you make of Taylor Fritz's 2025.
I mean, you look at what he did last year. He made his first Slam final. He made the ATP finals, and he made, 2 Masters semis. He did less this year, and he's kind of in position to do less. I don't predict him making the finals of Turin. He didn't win a Masters title. He made that really good semi at Wimbledon where he had a good match against Carlos Alcaraz, but that's one match. And he had that, I think if he had beaten Djokovic at the US Open, where I feel like he was really set up to, that was like, that's your moment. Like, this is your moment to like get that really signature win over the, you look at then at the women's side, a lot of those up and coming players got that win over Serena, and they're not coming from Djokovic in the same way. And so I do think it's a less disappointing year than Zverev, maybe because there was maybe more expected of Zverev than of Fritz, but it's not that much better. And arguably there are, you could argue that it's worse because Zverev made a slam final and Fritz didn't. So I'm inclined to give him like a B minus. I just feel like it's hard for me to give him anything. It almost feels like a C plus B minus just because, like you said, he was absent for really the first half of the year. He improved the second half and made it back to Turin. That's great, but it's not this sort of, this is not the follow-up that you're looking for from someone who made a Grand Slam. You compare that to a Jessica Pegula by contrast, who also had her struggles this year following up her Grand Slam final run, but then had a really strong finish and a stronger finish, I would say, than Fritz. So a B minus. I'll be nice because I'll throw in the Laver Cup results, even though I don't put as much stock into them as I feel you do.
Oh, it's part of the bias of being there. Look, again, the first
representing Team World.
Yeah, the first half of the season was so poor. Again, the first round exit for him at Roland Garros, the third round exit for him losing that match to Monfils as he did round 3 in Australia. He wasn't good. Indian Wells did make that Miami semifinal, but loses to Menchik there. I'll give him the Laver Cup success, but it was a bad loss to Yuri Lechechka in 3 set that ultimately handed the Davis Cup Czechia rubber over Team USA on home soil. And Team USA's continued struggles in Davis Cup, it matters to tennis fans. It matters to me, certainly.
Love Yuri Lechechka, by the way. I haven't had the opportunity to talk about that on this podcast. He is a fun talker. He is a nice guy. I would love to see him in Turin.
Yuri Lechechka guy.
For top 8. Oh my gosh.
I
was so impressed by him. Me and Howard Fendrick from the AP, we were sat in one of his press conferences before he played Carlos, and even after he played Carlos, just really a good talker, well-spoken, smart, I was totally one of them. That was my big takeaway from the US Open. I was like, oh good, Yuri Lechechka, good for a quote. That's one for the old dog in 2026.
He was my most underrated player in the world coming into this season. I think he's properly rated now in that 10 to 20 range. But sneaky young also, still just 23 years old.
Thank God.
On the Fritz front,
sure.
Age 28. It is a second consecutive Tour Finals. He has now made it 3 of the last 4 years. And if you were mapping out what does the prime of Taylor Fritz look like, this was probably it, because this is a guy who, again, a little athletically limited from a movement perspective. As much ground as he has made, no one will ever accuse him of being a good volleyer moving forward.
Accuse.
Yeah, and just, again, he's maximized every part of himself. He is also another one of those monomaniacal competitors, like I talked about with Djokovic, Lerner, where it's just like if he has the option to beat you or cut your throat, he wants the throat cut. And again, of these guys, where we talked about this at the start with this field, the biggest question in the world right now, as it relates to men's tennis, is who is the biggest threat to the duopoly forming with Sinner and Alcaraz. And move Novak Djokovic aside, because in theory, he won't be here forever. And he recently talked about 2028 Olympics, maybe a stop date. We don't have to discuss that now. But amongst the rest, there is a question. Well, forget long-term. Forget Fonseca long-term, Hodar long-term. Let's just focus 2026. Who is the player most likely to beat one of Sinner or Alcaraz at a major in 2026? And I do think, heading into these tour finals, David Kane, that Taylor Fritz has become the answer for me to that question. And I think in how he's flipped the rivalry. No. Not I'm saying long term. I'm talking immediate future. Like they match up Slam quarterfinals, Australian Open quarterfinals, Australian Open semifinals. I just think Fritz has the moxie to pull. Again, it helps that I watched him beat Alcaraz and saw what that had to look like, how aggressive he had to play. I also think, again, I just trust him in the big moments to find a big serve, to play on his terms, to not wilter and go out swinging. Again, he has flipped the Zverev rivalry. That's not insignificant as it relates to the broader hierarchy and the success of this season for him. Again, biggest long-term threat, he's not my answer. But in the immediate short-term future, he might just be the question to who's most likely to beat one of those guys at any given event.
I mean, again, I think that just is a kind of an indictment on the rest of the field if he's the most likely to do it. I mean, I think there are a lot of people and players who put a lot of emphasis
on weapons
on Laver Cup and feel like, those results, they're all there to win and blah, blah, blah. I don't think you can equate Alcaraz's level of intensity in a Laver Cup match to the Wimbledon semifinal. It's not going to be the same. And I think even Fritz is almost not delusional enough to not believe that. If you need to come away from that being I beat Alcaraz at Laver Cup. I could beat him at a slam. I don't think Fritz believes that either. So I think that's part of the problem. I mean, I think the real answer to that question, we can probably get into him next, is I think it's Ben. But also Ben has his own, physical limitations and perhaps tactical limitations at the moment. But I think of those two Americans, I would put more money on, Ben Shelton catching fire and having a great serving day and knocking one of them off the court versus a Taylor Fritz, who I think has gotten almost too many chances at this point. I mean, again, that not getting that Djokovic win over you at the U.S. Open was just sort of damning. That is the bare minimum to compete with this swap, to be okay, I finally got over the hump. I got a big mental victory. Now let's see how I compete against, an Alcaraz in the semifinal. And he didn't even get himself into that position. So that for me is really, that's brutal. He's got to start beating them yesterday.
I do think the result against Alcaraz and at Wimbledon in the semifinal forced that good match. And Djokovic to some extent, which was better than what we had seen from him traditionally in that sort of matchup. It was a step forward, but you're right. At age 28 years old, you can't just afford one step. You got to go out. You mentioned it. That was your moment to capitalize. It's also a tactical thing, a game style thing. I think his serve, just foundationally as a piece to be aggressive behind, allows him to keep pace in a way with Sinner and Alcaraz is just a necessity to possess, given the way those guys can overwhelm you with their pace so quickly. I'll go B-. Again, B-. He was so much better. Had he been who he's been since the grass court season, the front half of the year, I think we could be ranging towards B+. I think he'd probably be ranked 3 in the world. The problem was he really didn't get his season going till the start of grass court play. And you got to knock him for that. So I'm more B- range than C for Taylor Fritz, but I can settle with B-. That works just fine.
I'll give him a B- because I love Morgan. I feel like she's great. She's been a wonderful value add to the duopoly.
I like it. And we were talking about this earlier. Shout out to your sister-in-law. Shout out to Michael Russell. Shout out to me. 3 people from the Southeast Michigan suburbs. So shout out to the 3 of us. Michael Russell and I went to the same high school before he left for Saddlebrook, a few years later. But shout out Michael Russell. You mentioned Ben Shelton. That is where